This is HBR News number 526. Scott Adams secures support. FBI thwarts Valentine's massacre, where we discuss the news of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian, and I am here with Hannah Wallen and Mike Stevenson. We hope you guys are enjoying this week and that you're laughing at all this absurdity, so that you're not consumed by it. I'm just throwing at all the rules today. No, I'm doing new intros, whatever it is.
There we go.
Changing it up. Anyway, yeah. So welcome to the news show today. We got a big show, a really big show for you guys. On this week's HBR News, we're going to be talking about some recent news involving the cartoonist Scott Adams. You guys remember that he received basically a terminal cancer diagnosis, or seemingly terminal cancer diagnosis, and there have been some developments that are worth looking into. There was a planned Valentine's Day massacre that was intercepted by the FBI. A new knife attack, probably more since I even got this story, strikes in the UK, and more, so stick around. It's going to be a good time.
It's amazing what the FBI can accomplish when they're not investigating people for making comments on X about that disagree with.
Yeah, well, the cops can't be stopping knife crime. They're too busy answering, going to people's houses over tweets. And be sure to join us afterwards for the patron-only show. So there was this thing that happened on the internet that kind of blew it up, where one Tucker Carlson, former Fox News anchor turned sort of independent, had on the most censored and banned person on the internet, or at least one of the most. It's hard to say. Sometimes it's Alex Jones, sometimes it's Stefan Molyneux. But for now, it's Nick Fuentes. And they were on there together discussing all things, topical that people generally discuss. But the thing that seemed to really upset everyone was the way that they talked about women. Because, of course, like, when you remove everything else, all of the geopolitics, all of the stuff with foreign governments, and all of the stuff involving, like, immigration and the economy and home ownership and, all that, it always comes back to women. And this is the ultimate third rail. And they stepped on it. And this article, Baptist News Global, has some thoughts on that. So we're going to be talking about that in the Patron Show. And if you guys want to join us on the Patron Show, you have to become a Badger yourself by going to feedthebadger.com and setting up a monthly subscription. $5 a month will get you into the Discord server, where you'll be able to watch all of the additional content, as well as see, stuff before it goes up. There's lots of community things that are going on. We have game nights, movie nights, anime nights, whatever. So please consider joining our community by going to feedthebadger.com/subscribe to do that. And you can also send us a message at any point during the show, which will avoid the YouTube taking so much out of the money that you send. So if you don't want to give Google, the folks at Google, another yacht, then maybe go to feedthebadger.com/just-the-tip to send us a tip. And we'll basically get all of what you send, and you'll be able to say whatever you want without fear of reprisal from the powers that be. So, with all that out of the way, let us get into today's stories. And I thank you for your time here. All right, first, we have Scott Adams. So this is a short one. So Dilbert creator Scott Adams, if you guys don't know, he is dealing with advanced prostate cancer. And it was estimated that he wasn't going to make it to the winter time of this year, according to him. But he has made an appeal to President Donald Trump on X on November 2nd for any help expediting his approved Pluvicto infusion for advanced prostate cancer, delayed by Kaiser Permanente, Northern California. Trump responded swiftly with on it, prompting allies, including Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Donald Trump Jr., and Mehmet Oz, that's Dr. Oz, to assist, resulting in Adam scheduling the treatment by November 3rd, which is yesterday. The rapid response highlighted X's influence, but also sparked criticism over healthcare access inequalities for average patients.
Well, yeah, there is that.
Yeah.
When people get cancer, they will do anything to try and cure it. And tragically, there are many people for whom anything they can do is basically nothing because they can't afford anything. Whereas the rich and famous, when they get cancer, will move heaven and earth to stay alive. And that's where a lot of the funding into cancer research comes from, which is, I guess, a good thing. Maybe one day that research can benefit everyone. But yeah, there's this annoying paradox in life where the richer you are, the more free shit you get. The more famous you are, the more fame you are afforded for free. Like how Santa gives better presents to rich kids. And I'm not going to tell you that that's how capitalism works, because I refuse to use this loaded term capitalism to describe what is essentially just incentive for prosperity. If you can rise above that ceiling, you get these privileges, and so do your children. If you want these privileges in life, you should try to earn them by endeavoring to, I believe the term is get good, scrub. Adults need to get around to understanding that communism is not the answer, just like kids eventually need to grow up and realize that Santa does not. Do I go along with the meme? Fine, I hereby abort the sentence I was about to complete. Santa exists in the same way real communism exists, i.e. in the minds of those who believe in it. And it's a rite of passage that everyone needs to go through at some point in their life. Magic Man is not going to help you. He's just going to give you false hope in an impossible magical world. And it's up to you to transcend that impossible magic in the real world. Santa is the first test. And thankfully, just about everyone passes it as long as they make it to adulthood. Communism is the second test. And alas, far too many people fail it for the remainder of their lifetime. You know who does exist? Uncle fucking Sam. I mean, he is kind of elitist in a way, yes, but at least he achieves what he set out to achieve. Namely, he helps those who help themselves. He exists in the same way God exists, by simply representing a force of nature, one that will flourish if it is allowed to. Scott Adams gets this kind of help because a lot of people like Scott Adams. Despite some of the shit he got wrong over the years, I'm thinking of one thing in particular that he got wrong roughly 4 or 5 years ago. And I have the utmost respect for him for admitting that he got it wrong. And for even having the balls, to consider that the thing he was wrong about may very well be the reason he's currently staring down the barrel of his turbo cancer. So I'm glad that he is able to get treatment. I'm glad that treatment can be afforded to some people. But I hope at some point in the conversation, someone raises the subject of prevention, what with it being better than the cure. What could have been done to prevent this turbo cancer? What could have not been done so as to not cause this turbo cancer? I hope someone can whisper into Trump's ear about this little niggling matter, because he was wrong about it too. He warp speeded it just like every other government did. Is probably the biggest mistake he made. Ironically, it's the one mistake that his deranged detractors will never talk about. But they never gave a shit about the Epstein files until they came up under Trump. If Trump admitted that Operation Warp Speed was a mistake, then the TDS army will find themselves in a hell of a bind, a hell of a gravitron machine of cognitive dissonance. Will you admit that you all made a mistake if it means you get to blame Trump for that mistake? Probably not. Under the sunken cost fallacy, all other fallacies are, dare I say, trumped. But I just want to see it. I want to see the looks on their faces. I want to see their eyes darting from left to right at 1,000,000 miles an hour as they try to blame Trump for the mistake that everyone else made too. And I'm sure they'll figure it out. They'll figure out how to put the blame entirely on Trump. The blood clots, the strokes, the myocarditis, the pulmonary embolisms, all of it, all 9 pages of it. They'll blame it all on Trump, but at least they'll have to admit that it happened and why it happened. And maybe then we can work on making sure it never happens again. Yeah, now I'm the one indulging in wish thinking. I'm the one desperately trying to believe in a ruling media class that will ever admit to its mistakes, even through the proxy of a scapegoat, like the Emmanuel Goldstein of our age. That's that ruling media class is a magic man that will never exist, but it's a mythology that I conjure to myself whenever I'm alone at night and I'm trying to be optimistic, trying to lull myself to sleep with dreams of a better world. We're all entitled to our fantasies, and this is mine, a world where megalomaniacal collectives of psychopathic liars will ever hold themselves so much as peripherally accountable. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. By the way, I'm not really John Lennon. None of this is medical advice.
There you go. Among the many things that they may or may not admit in the future, there is one thing absolutely positively none of them will admit, except for maybe Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes, and that is that between the vaccine and the germ warfare that many people are still pretending was an accident, men were most affected. Mm-hmm. And I say this as somebody who lost 2 close female loved ones to the virus. More men died from it. Men were more likely to suffer long-term effects from it. And the same thing happened with the vaccine. Males were more likely to be injured by it. And I lost one male loved one to the vaccine. So yeah, everything Mike said times 10, except about our healthcare system. A lot of people from nations with metered healthcare don't understand the American healthcare system, and they don't understand what's wrong with it today or why it's wrong. And I have been the individual that everyone's talking about my whole life when they talk about how terrible our healthcare system is. Whether they're talking about the overprescription of drugs, whether they're talking about the middle class and the poor not having access, whether they're talking about treatments not being approved for people based on those people not fitting certain criteria, whether they're talking about employers and schools not accommodating disabilities, right? Whether they're talking about what happens when you have a catastrophic healthcare emergency and it's extremely expensive and you have to deal with the payments and everything. And the fact that after years of Americans making fun of the British dental system, the American dental system has decided to mirror it. That's me too. So I feel pretty qualified to talk about this from that standpoint, and also from the standpoint of having read the Obamacare bill that Congress refused to read before passing it, even though it was available. They could have read it. And having paid for insurance prior to and after Obamacare and seen the difference. And the one thing I will say that Obamacare did was I think it achieved what it set out to achieve, which was to make the American healthcare system so much harder to access and afford for working class people than it already was, that ignorant people would start clamoring for the same metered health care that is available in the UK and Canada and other places with socialized medicine. The reason I call it metered health care is, in America, you can't afford it, right? In Canada, they suggest that you should use the euthanasia system instead because you're too expensive. And in the UK, you can get your emergency must have it right now medical treatment next year or the year after, if you're lucky. Right? So it's definitely the worst system of all, except for all the others. Right? And if Obamacare had never happened, it would be less expensive, and the insurance system would be less fucked up. And it is incredibly fucked up. And if the Republicans don't fix it, the Democrats are going to convince large swatches of the public that it is the fault of the medical institutions and not the predatory insurance companies and pharmacies and pharmaceutical companies that consulted with Obama and the Obama administration in the course of designing that plan to make it so that you had to pay for insurance, but you couldn't afford to use it. And therefore, your healthcare problems are solved because you technically have access, you just can't use it. And that's on you, right? And again, this has been most affected because men are the ones usually who are the provider for their family, or they're on their own, and they're either paying for health care on their own, or they're paying for family health care. And the worst part is if your wife has a part-time job and they offer exorbitantly priced health care plans for their part-time workers at her job, your employer gets to charge you an extra fee for having a family plan. That fee didn't exist before Obamacare. Right? You could insure your family. You could purchase a family health care plan through an insurance provider, through your employer or on your own, and there was no fee for adding your spouse. Even if your spouse could get insurance through another employer. So it's essentially a way to just pickpocket men a little bit more, instead of providing health care a little bit more. And in the meantime, it hasn't changed the fact that most medical care that is unusual, not standard, atypical, whatever, most care for any kind of condition that's not by the book. If you're not a cookie cutter human, you get gate kept out anyway. For instance, if you have a condition that can manifest without all of its symptoms, but usually manifests with a particular set of symptoms, or at least a certain number from a particular set of symptoms, You have to go to get a DNA test for that. You have to go speak to a genetic counselor who will then deny you access to get that DNA test, that medical DNA test. And then if you can't pay out of pocket to a private company that does medical DNA testing, it's HIPAA protected, you can't find that out without giving your genetic information to 23andMe. If you happen to be the wrong sex to get a particular condition, like say male, but you get breast cancer, or female, but in your family the women get colon cancer and they get it young, like in my family, your doctor has to fight with your insurance company for 6 months after you start to have a symptom that's a little bit concerning before you can actually get a colonoscopy. And similarly, before you can actually get any further investigation into that lump that might actually be breast cancer, if you're male, because well, it's just really rare for that to happen, and we don't believe in this case that it did, right? And that's the insurance company. And they do that with everything because they're allowed. And they're allowed to not just send you for a second opinion like they used to, but use essentially vexatious demands for extensive amounts of paperwork and repeat responses to the same questions for your doctor to be able to get you the treatment that you need. So, guys like Adams, guys like well, everybody that goes through this kind of thing, like this is pretty typical, actually. I don't know anybody that hasn't had some kind of headache like that in their healthcare history in the last 10 or so years. So it's pretty normal now. And I can remember when they used to just send you for a second opinion. And once in a blue moon, they would suggest that something was elective, like rhinoplasty to fix a sinus issue, because rhinoplasty can also be done for looks, right? Well, you have to prove that it's for a sinus issue. So the doctor has to document what the sinus issue is. That's it. And then they only have to do it once. But today, you have to go through every hoop in the book to get that done. So yeah, every single one of those things, you know, once again, like it'll affect a few women like me, but mostly it's going to hit men first in the wallet, and then in a failure to get health care, and finally, in a failure to be taken seriously when they really need health care. And this is just a prime example. They don't want to make this available. And they don't like the idea that it might be successful. So therefore, it's hard for him to get. It shouldn't be, but it is. And Obamacare is probably at the roots of that too.
Well, all I'll say is I saw that Scott Adams was losing his ability to draw at one point because of the cancer.
Oh,
And I hope that this works for him and it gives him a little bit more time. Because yeah, I mean, look, cancer is not fun. And I don't know if he's doing chemo. I think he is. I think that's what this is about. And that's also not fun. I know. I've done it. And I don't know, like he's got prostate cancer, which is one of the big cancers that men have to face, that generally doesn't see the same amount of funding or awareness raising that other cancers get. So this is another thing, especially this month, which is interesting because November is a kind of men's health awareness month, and it's interesting that this is happening at that time. So, guys, if you're getting into your late 40s, especially even your 50s, you might need to like see a doctor about your prostate. It's not fun, but it's necessary. So, and I won't go into like where it could have come from. He's definitely in the age range where this becomes a thing. So, and I hope that I'm glad that people came out and helped him. I don't care that he seems to be getting like better treatment than poor people. That doesn't matter to me. I think that he's getting help from people, and that's good enough. So that's all I'll say about that. We'll see how it goes, and I hope that he's able to at least draw again, because that sucks too. I also had that happen where
Ooh.
I got so sick that I couldn't move. My hands were trembling, and I couldn't draw or write or anything for months, and it wasn't fun because it's like one of the things I like to do. So anyway, with that said,
it'd be like losing one of your senses.
Yeah.
Like the same thing happened when I had difficulty holding cameras.
Exactly.
One more thing that needs to be said about this, because it is a point on prostate cancer, and while I no longer support the Movember Foundation because they're supporting psychological treatment that relies on feminist terms like toxic masculinity. The Prostate Cancer Foundation is widely recognized for directing the largest portion of its donations toward research, and it's actually got a pretty good track record for success. So they're a good one to look up and donate to, the Prostate Cancer Foundation, and this would be a good month to give directly to them, because I'm not supporting the Movember Foundation doesn't mean I don't support Prostate Cancer Awareness Month, and that is this month. So that's where I would suggest, if you're going to respond to this kind of reminder that somebody that everybody knows who he is going through it, by donating to an organization to continue research and finding better ways to treat and prevent and maybe someday cure prostate cancer. The Prostate Cancer Foundation is a pretty good choice.
Yeah. But let us know what you guys think about this story in the comments. And like I said, just like, don't wait, and if you can, be adamant about your health. It matters. All right, I got a super chat and a super chow, and then we're gonna move on. So Guild of Arcane Lore gave us a super chat for $2.79 in Canadian pesos, and said, FBI too busy redacting the EPS. I guess you mean Epstein files. All right, thank you for that. Are you like, we were talking about the British police, though? I hope you understand the context, but sure. And then Richard BR gave us $5 and said, Obamacare has contributed additional steps to converting the healthcare system into a Rube Goldberg machine, with the exception that the simple task that the machine platform performs in the most complicated way possible doesn't always get achieved. All right, thank you for that, Richard. All right, so we're going to move on to the next story. Let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. Oh, and then, by the way, there were some messages of support for Scott Adams generally. Yes, Jack Posobiec said, I can confirm Scott Adams now has an appointment tomorrow for his cancer treatment, which was yesterday. It looks like everybody came out in support of him. So that's good. I hope that he recovers, and we'll see. All right, moving on. This one kind of flew under the radar. I learned about it, and I sent it to Mike J, and he did a good job. So this is a Mike J write-up here. Indiana police, as well as the FBI, prevented a possible school shooting earlier this year. and the would-be perpetrator has just pled guilty. 18-year-old female to male transgender Trinity J. Shockley, who authorities say goes by either Jamie or Dex, entered into a plea agreement 2 weeks ago for the charges of conspiracy to commit murder, which saw the additional 2 counts of intimidation to commit terrorism dropped. Shockley was charged back in February of this year after the FBI tipped off local police that Shockley was planning a shooting, had access to an AR-15, and had ordered a bulletproof vest online. Shockley was obsessed with school shooters, particularly 2018 Parkland school shooter Nicholas Cruz, and wanted to carry out her attack on the same day as his, Valentine's Day. When authorities searched Shockley's home, they uncovered photo albums, notebooks, and even a shrine all dedicated to various school shooters and mass shooters. Some of these notebooks contain entries like, quote, "These thoughts never seem to stop. You may believe that I am some edgelord, but in reality, I'm just a loser. I'm grateful for my chance to live, but in reality, I'm scared of living. Is it the government, you ask? No. It is this sad reality of living with a piece of shit. With pieces of shit, I'm sorry. I hope whoever reads this takes acknowledgement and maybe uses it for your massacre." A smiley face. End quote. Shockley tried to explain away her actions, stating that the plan was all a joke. Authorities stated, quote, Shockley stated that Shockley wanted to recreate what Cruz did, but Shockley would never do anything like that. It was said out of rage. Shockley is trying to get help with it. Shockley wanted to be in homeschool because of how bad the thoughts got. Shockley was also active on social media, such as Discord and Snapchat, where she went by the handle Crazy Nicolas, and discussed plans for Parkland Part 2, and stated, quote, "I'll be honest, I'm close to shooting mine up. I have an AR-15, end quote. Speaking further to police, Shockley said that she was the victim of harassment and bullying in school after being hit by a drunk driver, an incident that left her with a fractured skull and brain injuries. Police noted that ever since the incident, she sought mental health support from her school district, but her father denied these requests as he did, quote, "not believe in mental health treatment," end quote. Shockley faces between 10 and 30 years in prison, with her attorney requesting 12 and a half years and up to 5 years probation. Terms of this probation include mandatory mental health checkups, prohibition on searching for school shooting related content, as well as being banned from entering Morgan County school properties.
This is once again where there's not much we can do except play the blame game again. It always seems inappropriate, even in a case like this where there aren't any murders we have to tiptoe around so as to not step on their graves or anything. And from every angle, it seems like some people will always be blaming the wrong thing. A lot of people will be blaming the father for, quote, not believing in mental health treatment. But something tells me that what he meant was he doesn't trust the institutions generally in charge of mental health. And frankly based, such institutions are usually rife with quacks and kooks whose only proposed solution to a young adult who thinks they're a loser is to convince them that they are in the wrong body, as if that's going to do anything but exacerbate the idea that you're a loser. If your soul has been accidentally placed in the wrong body, then yeah, that sounds like loss to me. Whatever God or not God you believe in, being accidentally tossed into the wrong body is going to make you feel like a loser, like you've been dealt a really bad hand in life. And furthermore, that there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, short of perhaps eschewing this obviously bogus notion and maybe entertaining the notion that there's no such thing as being in the wrong body. It sounds like the father was on the right side of this issue, but alas, I don't have all that much information. And it's not just mental health institutions that are broadly guilty of instilling this delusion in young adults and indeed in children. It's schools. It's the teachers and the administrations in schools who will pander to these delusions, either because they don't want to offend the high priests of this cult, or because they themselves are the high priests of this cult. Yeah, and it's not just the teachers and the administration, it's the very nature of schools under any given administration. It's like I was talking about a couple of months ago, when a similar thing happened. There's a reason shootings tend to take place in schools and not in amusement parks or whatever, not in places where it's fun to be. Kids hate schools for a reason, especially introverted kids. And there are a lot of them. Lord knows, I was an introverted kid, and God, yes, I hated schools. School is a fucking nightmare for introverts. They have to spend 7 hours a day, 200 days a year, surrounded by monsters, cruel, tribalistic monsters with undeveloped brains. Like I keep saying, homeschool your kids if you can, and if you can't, figure out how you can. Because sure enough, this individual reportedly wanted to be homeschooled. They freely and enthusiastically said so. How explicit does this have to be? How many kids have to keep saying, I hate it in school. I've always hated it. Please stop sending me there or I'm going to lose my fucking mind. How long do they have to keep saying this before somebody joins the dots? If guns were the problem, you would see mass shootings taking place in just random locations, just anywhere. But if they keep taking place in schools more than anywhere else, maybe schools are the problem. And I put it to you that they are. And the growing prevalence of transgender school shooters indicates, at least to me, that there is a connection with what schools are teaching students about gender. And I'm not saying schools should be shut down. I'm just joining some dots here. I'm just asking questions. Maybe schools would be slightly less hellish places to be if they weren't being run by these tunnel vision zealots of a certain gender ideology that has been running away with itself for a century now. You might say that an easy fix would be to go back to segregated schools, gender segregated schools. And yeah, maybe, or maybe boys and girls can integrate together as long as they're not being ruled by crazy gender ideologues who are determined to enforce the opposite of segregation, the forcing of males and females into the same homogenous, non-binary mass of beige blobs, right? Maybe we can meet in the middle somewhere where we don't need to be segregated or mashed up into a blob. Maybe males and females are different, not entirely different, but reasonably different, and that's fine. Having said that, I think segregation is the better option of the two directions. I mean, if I had to pick one, I mean, when schools were largely segregated, there were little to no mass shootings or mass stabbings, even though there were far more guns and roughly the same amount of knives, I would presume. At least that's what I can ascertain. You never know how much history has been covered up, just like you never know how much the FBI is lying. Maybe they're still lying. They probably are. It seems to be their main job. I don't know crap about shit. Except that, I mean, I do know, at least to a reasonable extent, that males and females are different. Like, fuck what the FBI is telling us, fuck what the police and the media are telling us. How about let's start with what is fucking obvious, even to the lowest IQ imaginable. Males and females are different. Anyone who refuses to understand this should not be put in charge of children. Or adults, frankly, or any sexual species. If you can't understand that, go fuck off and study single-celled organisms or something. But, you know, I'm not a doctor. None of this is medical advice.
Yeah. One thing that male and female children have in common, though, right, is the devil made me do it. And they'll come up with an excuse for everything they do wrong, everything they do that's not acceptable. And if adults allow the excuses to stand, then the child will continue to make more excuses. And in this case, the first excuse that I saw there was I'm just a loser. I can't. I think this way because I'm a loser. It's just me. Blah blah blah. Um, it I've hung out with people who thought of themselves as just losers growing up. I thought of myself that way in a lot of ways. And it's bullshit to say that somebody who just feels like a loser is automatically going to decide they should go shoot up a school. Right? When you look at the history of actual school shootings, there are always a couple of other factors involved. And one reason that the father was right in this case to not send her to mental health care and think that was going to solve all of her problems is that they have a tendency to just throw selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors at a child having mental health issues. And if you look back at earlier school shootings, almost everyone involved, almost every shooter was found to be on selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. It's the thing that those things do to you that most people, if you haven't been subjected to them, you've never experienced this. It's a very weird condition to be put in. If you are put on these meds because you're suffering from depression or some other mood condition, they don't necessarily get rid of that condition. They're pretty decent anti-anxiety meds, but they're not that great for treating a lot of other conditions. And so what you end up with is if you have intrusive thoughts, if you're suicidal, if you're homicidal, if you're just an asshole, anything like that. And selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors are used to try to treat your condition. Instead of changing your condition, they just remove your anxiety about the potential consequences of acting on your intrusive thoughts. It makes it very difficult to refrain from, say, following up on that suicidal ideation. And if you don't have something else, like a moral code or consideration for what your family will go through after your suicide, that would stop you, or people who care enough to notice and figure out what's going on and try to stop you, you're more likely to go through it. And so it's dangerous to just turn the kid over to the healthcare system and say, well, fix this, it's broken, because it doesn't work. The healthcare system is not a tool set. You, as the parent, have to be the most involved in your kid's life. If everybody was fighting him on that, that probably fucked her up even more. That's one thing. The second excuse I noticed was this happened after harassment and bullying and getting hit by a drunk driver. So, okay, like everything in the world hasn't happened to me, but this just happens to be coincidentally one of the things that did. My family was hit by a drunk driver. My grandmother, my mother, and I were on our way from Western Ohio to Eastern Ohio, and we got hit. We got T-boned, and it was so bad that that it bent our car around the front corner of the other car like a fortune cookie. They had to use the jaws of life to get my mom out. She was hit so hard, both of her lungs collapsed. I was like 10 years old. I was sitting in the back of the car. I was actually asleep when the vehicle hit. So I was laying down in the seat. If I hadn't had motion sickness, I'd have been laying on my right side instead of on my left side. And if that had been the case, you wouldn't be listening to this story. But I was laying curled up with my head behind my grandmother's seat instead. And y'all get to hear how I sat there helplessly as a 10-year-old and watched my mom suffocate. Like, I could hear her gasping for breath. Very traumatic incident. I used to not be able to talk about this at all. If I did talk about it, I ended up in tears and shaking and all of the things that happen with trying to recount a horrible experience. It was the scariest thing that happened to me up until the point where I mistakenly thought the doctor was saying my son was going to die when I was in labor. That wasn't what he was saying, and that wasn't what was happening, but that was still as scary as if it was real. And I've never let a trauma make me want to kill other people. Not even once. I got bullied when I was a kid. Y'all have heard some of those stories. We got mugged for our Halloween candy one time by high school kids when I was in elementary school. I think people have heard that story a dozen times, if not more. This is not an excuse. Every kid that's been bullied, that's been male, that has gone on to be a school shooter, the first thing that you hear is, he should have known better. That's not a solution. That's not an answer. Something needs to be done by the administration, but shooting the people who weren't bullying him isn't the answer. It's no different just because this is a girl. She's not any more vulnerable than her male classmates just because she's a girl. She's not any less culpable for her decisions just because she's a girl. She's not any less dangerous. When you buy the supplies to commit a violent crime and you tell people you are going to commit a violent crime and you write in your diaries that you're going to commit a violent crime, you tell your parents you need help because you're going to commit a violent crime, it stops being a joke at some point. If she was a boy, they would be talking about trying her as an adult for attempting this and putting her in jail instead of getting her help. But because she's a girl, she's going to get lenience and everybody's going to be sympathetic. And we're not going to talk about the thing that we should always talk about when somebody goes from infant to violent criminal before they ever reach adulthood, which is, what the fuck were the adults doing in this kid's life that failed her so badly that this is where she ended up? And I'm not going to exempt the father, but the mother needed to be in lockstep with him and putting her foot down and spending individual time and family time with her daughter, finding out what was going on with her and understanding. And if the mother had passed away, every teacher in the school, every female teacher in the school is culpable. Not as substitute moms, but because they know that this is a kid who's minus one parent. Like, I don't know the family situation, so I'm not saying that that's what happened. But every single adult, just like I said after the Parkway shooting, every single adult in this kid's life failed her. She's culpable for her choices, and they are culpable for their failures. And it is time that we start looking at violent kids as reasons why we need to evaluate how kids are being raised in our society. What are we doing? What are we allowing to happen? What are we ignoring? What's in our public school system? Right? What are parents failing to do? that leads to this, because it's not something that just is a natural outcome. As people grow up, when they mature and they learn lessons in life that make them more mature people, and they become better able to fit in society, they become less violent, not more violent. Toddlers don't run around killing people, so if a teenager does, they've become more violent. So yeah, this is an issue of a few different things. And they may have ignored this problem as it was developing, specifically because people think girls aren't dangerous. Girls can be very dangerous if they are allowed to not develop mentally the way that they should, psychologically the way that they should, and they don't get the support they need. If they are taught stupid things in schools that fuck with their heads, and they are essentially treated as accessories instead of growing adults, then yeah, they can become exactly like this, just like boys. And then actually, there have been a number of girls that have been school shooters, including the first one to be reported in the news as a school shooter. So the first school shooter to be reported in the news as a school shooter was a girl. And I think we've talked about that before too. So I'm sad for this kid, just like I am for every kid that has a catastrophic failure in development like this. But I think that it is important that we recognize that part of the problem is not taking seriously the threat that a girl can present, and not taking seriously the impact that fucking with kids' heads can present.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I'll add to that, because you guys said a lot already, is that we're gonna have to start like really considering looking into why all this violence is coming out of the trans population. And I think that it's a product of well, it's hard to say, but I wouldn't be surprised if part of it is an identity crisis that leads to, let's say, a misanthropic worldview. That but I think that we need to really consider, we need to really look at like the mental health issues with people who think they are trans, especially young people who haven't, done the work, don't really know what they are. They see it as a trend or a social contagion or something to do so you stand out in some way, and maybe there's something deeper than that in their personal life. Probably something going on at home, I don't know. But I think we have to, well, for my part, I don't promote, or let's say vocally support people with a trans identity. I don't necessarily condemn them or shame them, but I'm not going to participate in normalizing it, because I think that it leads to stuff like this. I think that especially if they're young and there's no way they could know, I think that it's a problem. So this is something that just to add to everything else that's already been said, and I'm glad that the FBI stopped this. And I think this is like a point for them, that I would say, because we've had a spate of trans shootings, and there are cults like the Zizians, which I've talked about on the channel before, that form. And I wouldn't say it's around trans ideology; it's more around a kind of like materialist, rationalist ideology. I know that sounds crazy, but that's what they're like, extreme rationalists. And so I think they rationalize that the body you live in is just like a vessel that you can change depending on how you feel, and they rationalize that. And I think that they become, well, I know that they do. Andy No has done a lot of reporting on this stuff, and I think that it's something we should, we should set aside the stigma of offending trans people and look at what is really going on, because this is like going to get worse if we don't take it seriously. So,
well, something else to consider with regard to the trans issue is this, right? There's a reason why gender dysphoria used to be really, really rare. It's because actual gender dysphoria is really, really rare. It's not a condition that happens very often. The things that cause it are not conditions that happen very often. And it used to prompt the individual to not just want to identify as something like non-binary or any other iteration of I'm a girl today and I'm a boy tomorrow, or maybe I'm both at the same time and blah blah blah, even if you don't have the hormones and the biological conditions that cause that. It's something that the individuals who experienced it were prompted emotionally to want to adopt all of the characteristics of the opposite sex that they possibly could. And we have today the people that are labeled troons. When you look at them, they don't do that. And the reason they don't do that is because they don't actually have gender dysphoria. And when it comes to kids in school who are suddenly developing this so-called social contagion, they're not developing it because they were confused and their teacher helped them identify it. They are developing it because their teacher presented being something other than the gender, the sex they were born as, because you don't have gender. Human beings do not have gender. It does not exist in humans. Your plug for your lamp that you plug into the wall, that has gender. And the outlet that you plug it into has gender. The lamp plug is male, the outlet is female. Words have gender. People have sex. People are one sex or the other sex, and a very tiny minority of the population is somewhere on a spectrum in between because of genetic differences. So when teachers start presenting being something on a spectrum of 72 alleged genders as the way to get approval, the way to be one of the cool kids, being not straight and not identifying as the sex you were born, becomes the only way a student who feels uncool or stressed about socialization, or otherwise unable to fit in, can make themselves a niche in which to fit, make themselves important and special, and gain their teacher's approval and gain protection, some protection at least, from bullies, because schools have specific policies related to their specific identity. And what happens when that kid doesn't actually have gender dysphoria? It's the same thing that happens if they treat you for bipolar disorder when you don't actually have bipolar disorder, or if they treat you for schizophrenia when you don't actually have schizophrenia. It will drive you crazy. It will make you nuts. And it will cost you your ability to relate effectively with other people and with yourself. You end up in an identity crisis and, in fact, develop a dysphoria around reality. And it's very upsetting and very discombobulating and very very much a reason why a student might become violent or suicidal. And most of us that get gaslighted like that by the healthcare system, we become suicidal. Occasionally, you get a kid like this that becomes violent, and I'm glad it was prevented. Just like I'm glad when every suicide is prevented. Like every time we can prevent an untimely death, that's a good thing. But it's a Band-Aid. And until they get this system straightened out and stop fucking with kids' heads, that's not going to change. There will be more. This is going to continue, and it's going to get worse. So, in your community, if you are able, you should be pushing for your school board, your local school board, and your state school board or province school board, whatever, to get this shit out of your schools, because it is killing your children.
Yeah, I'm sorry. One more quick point. I'll be as quick as I can. But I'm glad this wasn't talked about for 10 months, and I kind of wish it was never talked about. People have been warning us about this ever since Columbine, and even since before Columbine. That this transcends, dare I say, the trans premise or any other premise other than the fame that comes with being a perpetrator of these mass tragedies. Herostratic fame is often called, after the guy who burned down the Library of Alexandria just to become famous. And the ancient Greeks tried to cover it up for the longest time, but they couldn't, because eventually the guy Herostrates or whatever his name was, I don't want to remember his name because that's the point. He committed this tragedy in order to become famous. And so the responsibility of the media should be not to publicize these things, because that's what makes people famous. And even in the absence of any of these fucked up ideologies, if you publicize the events of this tragedy, then you will spur on copycat killers who also want to become famous. And it's a hell of a situation now that we live in this world where any citizen journalist can report on these things. So it's impossible to sweep it under the rug. But this is a responsibility that citizen journalists should bear in mind just as much as the mass media should bear in mind. Like, if it's at all possible, well, if in the event that these tragedies are just random events caused by no particular pattern, you shouldn't publicize them, because you'll cause other people to think, well, it made that person famous, I can be famous too, even in death, and that's all I want. But like I said, given that there are so many patterns, like with SSRIs, like with the trans thing, and like with certain religious ideologies and such, if you promise people, if fame is promised to people in the event that they kill a bunch of people and then die, at least they will be remembered. I mean, if there are patterns, then the people should know about the patterns so that they can prevent it from happening. But if there is no pattern, then just don't talk about it. And I can. That's a fool's folly to say don't talk about it. It's impossible for people not to talk about it now that everyone is so capable of talking about it. It's a really shite state of affairs, and I don't know how we get out of it, other than by addressing the patterns that make these things happen. And I believe we've already covered those patterns to the best as we can. So let's move on to something
All right.
else.
Well, okay. So I got a super chow from Meredith G, who gives us 5 and says, "Honey, HBR News number 526, honey for the Badgers." So I'm going to point something out. One thing we never talk about is that mass shooting has a contagion factor, and we should notice how susceptible those who are attracted to the trans ideology are to committing acts of mass violence. There is something about how that ideology that F's with people's minds. Yes, thank you, Meredith. Appreciate it. That's what I was gonna say.
Well, it's victim ideology. That's why
it is, and then there's like a.
When you think about it, other people who are not associated with trans ideology that have committed acts of mass violence, One thing that they all have in common, besides the fact that many of them are on selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors and many of them don't have a father at home, is the fact that they identify as victims of something and they are taking it out on the people around them. And most of the time, their victimhood, their identity of victimhood is disproportionate to the issues that they are attributing it to. So there's a mentality that inflates victimhood, that inflates it exponentially like that is attracted to mass contagions, and in particular, those that contain built-in victimhood. I would say probably feminism is something that people should be concerned about as well. And feminists have committed mass violence in the past. So there you go.
Yeah. All right, well, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. We're going to move on to the next story. Okay. So Nigeria, you guys may have heard, has been plagued by severe religious violence, particularly in its northern and middle belt regions, where Islamist groups like Boko Haram, which, by the way, we have talked about Boko Haram in the past, so I thought it was interesting to connect it to this. Islamic State West Africa Province, the ISWAP, and radicalized Fulani herdsmen have targeted Christian communities amid broader insurgencies, farmer-herder clashes, and banditry. Reports from organizations such as Open Doors and the International Society for Civil Liberties and the Rule of Law indicate that over 52,000 Christians have been killed since 2009, with more than 7,000 deaths in the first half of 2025 alone, an average of about 35 Christians a day, alongside thousands of churches burned and villages destroyed. These attacks often involve massacres, kidnappings, and sexual violence, displacing tens of thousands and making Nigeria the deadliest country globally if you're Christian, where believers are 6.5 times more likely to be killed for their faith than Muslims. However, analysts and monitoring groups like the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project emphasize that the violence is multifaceted, driven by ethnic tensions, resource disputes, and economic factors, not a state-orchestrated genocide, with most victims of jihadist groups being Muslims and only about 50 of 1,923 civilian attacks in 2025 explicitly religion-targeted. The Nigerian government under President Bola Tinubu has denied claims of systematic persecution, highlighting military gains against terrorists, such as neutralizing over 13,500 fighters and balanced religious representation in leadership, though critics argue inadequate protection persists. So this is where our president stepped in. President Donald Trump has responded aggressively, redesignated Nigeria as a country of particular concern on October 31st, 2025, for severe religious freedom violations and threatening to halt all aid while ordering the Pentagon to plan a fast, vicious military action, including potential airstrikes or troop deployment to eliminate Islamist terrorists if killings continue. This echoes his 2020 designation, which was reversed by Biden in 2021, and aligns with U.S. lawmakers like Senator Ted Cruz and Representatives Chris Smith and Riley Moore, who have pushed for sanctions and investigations, citing Nigeria as facing an existential threat to Christianity. Other world leaders' responses have been more restrained. Nigeria's Tinubu welcomed U.S. anti-terror aid but rejected genocide claims and military threats as sovereignty violations. China's foreign ministry opposed U.S. interference under religious pretexts, and the European Parliament queried the EU on bolstering protections and diplomacy. The U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops and groups like International Christian Concern have urged global humanitarian aid and accountability, but broader international action remains limited amid debates over the violence's framing.
Yeah, they're calling it ethnic, but I know there are moderately different ethnic groups in Nigeria, just like there are moderately different ethnic groups along all of Africa, even within African countries, especially larger ones, especially ones with enormous populations like Nigeria. Nigeria's about 150 million people or something. It's mental. And so, in a way, this was inevitable. Africa, for the last few centuries, has been a breeding ground for colonial outsiders, and not just of the national kind, also of the monotheistic kind. North Africa and, to some extent, East Africa are mostly Islamic at this point, which makes sense because Islam has invaded by land across from the east via Egypt, whereas Christendom invaded by sea because Britannia ruled the waves. That's how it got hold of Western Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, and there's been this standoff for some time because of the Great Barrier of the Sahara Desert. Like nobody can cross the Sahara Desert, certainly not in armies or whatever. Nigeria seems to be the first major country where that conflict has finally bled through. Apparently, the Muslims have finally managed to cross the desert. Well, it's not. It's less about that and more about how ruthless Islam has become over the years, and how comparatively feeble and anemic Christianity has become, even in Africa. Maybe it's because so many Christian nations have they were trying to missionary Christianity across Africa in the first place, have religiously imploded over the years due to what I choose to call cultural oikophobia or religious oikophobia. Maybe it's because Christianity was destined to fall into this love thy neighbor. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the answer is for all these African nations to cast off these foreign religions and get back to their animist roots. But that's like expecting Europe to get back to its pagan roots, like with the Druids and all that. But it's a nice idea, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. Like, for whatever reason, one god always seems to win against multiple gods. It sounds counterintuitive, but it is what it is. Maybe a better answer would be for people to find their balls, to find their gumption and say, okay, we're on board with your Jewish God and your other interpretations of this Jewish God, but we're not going to kill people because of it. Again, it sounds unlikely, but it's what we did in Europe. We used to kill each other over this Jewish God, but we eventually went, let's not do this anymore. We can still believe, but maybe let's not do all the religious genocide. Of course, it took like a world war or two before we could figure this out. So it's not looking good for the outskirts of sub-Saharan Africa, especially given that it's a war not just between factions of Christianity, but a war between Christianity and Islam, the two biggest religions in the world, both directed by the same Jewish God, by the way. So, yeah, I don't know what to say other than to say what your average fedora-tipping atheist would say. Just don't believe in your God anymore. That's not going to work. So I'll try to tone it down and up at the same time. It's okay for you to believe in your Jewish God, or so should I say the Jewish God that's been imposed on you. But do see if you can learn from our mistakes, from our European mistakes. Millions could die. Millions. So please learn from history. Yeah, you all do have a sense of history, right? In sub-Saharan Africa, you do see time as moving in that direction, right? From past to future. Oh, shit! You see time in the exact opposite direction. Where the
do be like that, Mr. Stevenson.
Well, shit. All right, fuck it. None of my business. Go ahead and cull your population. I'm moving back. I'm not a religious, austere scholar. None of this is sharp. Go ahead, Harry.
So, A while back on HBR Talk, we were actually looking at Nigeria, but this is not the side of the issue that we were looking at. Interestingly, this has been going on for longer than the article talks about. It's been an on and off thing for decades, and I can remember missionaries from my church going to Africa because of circumstances like this, and everybody being worried because of circumstances like this. So, and it's not just in Nigeria. This is happening in other African nations as well. It's just that currently the worst iteration of it is in Nigeria. And it all goes back, to the world wars. But Nigeria and other nations in Africa have been affected by a humanitarian initiative veil infection for a long time from the U.S., where we've sent organizations funded by our federal government over there to interfere with their local politics, to interfere with their local family structure, to essentially create a feminist nation in every African nation, to create the circumstances that prompt many men to adopt the Islam mentality toward women. I've made this argument recently on X, and I have really pissed off some feminists, so I must be right. I'm over the target because I've got a couple of them trying their damnedest to flame me, and it's kind of funny because they're kind of inept. But when you take a group of people and an entire demographic of the population based on some immutable characteristic, and you say this immutable characteristic defined portion of the population is responsible for the choices of this other immutable characteristic defined portion of the population. Adults responsible for other adults' choices. What you are leading to logically is that the scapegoated portion of the population is obligated to control the choices of the not responsible portion of the population. And their obligation to control those choices generally pans out in a system of restrictions on the not responsible portion of the population and a system of guardianship that is to be stewarded and enacted by the scapegoat population. And that is essentially what happens between men and women under Islamic guardianship. The idea that men are responsible for women's choices and therefore obligated to control women's choices, and therefore women cannot go any place alone. Women cannot have any of their skin showing. Women cannot have jobs, drive cars, whatever, depending on which nation you're talking about. Have to have their hair covered. Anything that shows that they're female. And they don't get to decide who they're going to marry in some nations, and don't get to decide whether or not they're consenting to sex, and so on. And the feminists got really mad when I pointed that out. That you can't scapegoat a population demographic based on their immutable characteristics as being responsible for your choices that you have sole control over, without inspiring them to presume obligation to control your choices. And I think that a lot of the problems that we're seeing in Africa today can trace directly back and be laid directly at the feet of the feminist organizations that the federal government has been funding for 50 fucking years, going over there and engaging in this bullshit, teaching women to not value their families as much as they value their egos, engaging in promotion of male genital mutilation, abortion, divorce, and sexual promiscuity on a continent where these things have all proved to be deadly to the people engaging in them. When you split up families, they're more likely to starve to death. In a nation where food is scarce and resources are scarce, when you impose that on families, you are killing people. You are responsible for their deaths. When you promote sexual promiscuity on a continent where AIDS has been an epidemic since it first started, you are killing people. You are responsible for their deaths. When you promote male genital mutilation on a continent where the worst iteration of it involves cutting the penis in half from the bottom. Sorry, guys, if I made anybody throw up. You're killing people. You're responsible for it. And our government, our feminist-run government, has been doing that for as long as I've been alive. There have been numerous organizations that we looked at on HBR Talk that have been over there and all over the rest of the world. They're in South America, they're in Europe, they're in parts of North America, doing this shit, promoting these things, pushing for a division between women and men, while scapegoating men as responsible for women's choices. What do you think's going to happen? Gosh, you're going to inspire men to flock to a religion that doesn't do that to them without giving them control over those choices. Feminism is cancer, and it's killing Africa. And I blame feminism for the spread of Islam in Africa and the deaths of every Christian that has been killed because Islam in Africa is opposed to Christianity, even though their religious book says that they're supposed to get along. Apparently that part, he didn't mean it. Yeah, I may be really pissed off about this. My tax dollars, my parents' tax dollars, my whole family's tax dollars was spent to promote things in foreign nations that killed people for believing in the things that we believe in. If you're a Christian in the United States, or if you care about human life at all, and if you care about men at all, because who do you think is being conned into doing this killing, or is being inflamed into doing this killing? And who do you think is trying to protect their families first, is the first in line to get killed, trying to prevent the women and children and their families from dying? It's men and older boys, and in some cases, young boys. So if you care about men and boys, if you care about human life, if you care about genocide, if you care about Christians being massacred, then you should be turning your ire toward the establishment in DC. I don't want to see American young men and boys being sent anywhere to fight. And I hope that this can be resolved without that happening. But if it can't, and our government decides to send them, blame feminists. Feminists are directly responsible for this. They pushed the first domino, and they demanded your money be spent to do it.
On a brighter note, I'll add that you don't normally hear about Christians as a demographic being attacked or genocided in the same way you don't hear that about white people. So what Trump is doing, spotlighting it, I don't think it's purely political, but it has the side effect, like political as in like it's to like sort of increase favor for him. But it does have the side effect of doing that, at least making people pretty like confused about whether or not that whole thing about him being racist, for example. Like, why would he look out for Nigerian Christians? And he did the same, like when he allowed some South African farmers to come to the States. That also, like, made some heads explode. And again, I just think, but for my part, the thing that stands out for me is that you don't really hear this, like from in the media. Um, and I mean, like whether it's our news or our entertainment, Christianity is attacked about as much as men are, maybe a little bit less. And I think that there is like a link there that is something we should be aware of, that there's a connection, that these things get attacked for a reason. Um, so I'm glad that he's, putting a spotlight on it. I don't think it's going to be necessary for him to put boots on the ground there. I think that because what's happening is this is happening to the Christians there, and the government of Nigeria isn't participating in it, but they are running cover for it because they're trying to downplay it. Well, and this is again what happened in South Africa, and the reason why is because if they had to fess up to what was going on, then they'd have to like deal with the United States military. So they don't want to, so they're just like trying to distract or obfuscate or dismiss or downplay. But I don't think we're going to go for it. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to escalate into anything. And it's a good thing that this is, again, being highlighted. It's good that people know that this is happening. And look, if you live in a Western country like Canada, Europe, the United Kingdom, the United States, whether you're religious or not is sort of irrelevant. The countries are built on a religious, a sort of Christian baseline, and that combined with Hellenic, sort of ancient Greece and Rome values, were like the substrate under on which our belief systems in these countries as base. And this is the thing, like with a lot of other countries, they don't share that. And Nigeria being Christian, or other Christian countries like Ethiopia, I believe is a majority Christian country, that's a threat to Islamic nations, because the central, I guess you could say, the central difference between Christianity and Islam and Judaism is that Christianity assumes that we're all made in the image of God, and therefore we all have free will and we all make choices as individuals, and that's the only way you will. It's the only path by which you can get closer to Jesus Christ. But it must be a choice of free will. And Islam does not believe in free will; they believe in submission. And Judaism believes in exclusion. So they don't line up with this. Only Christianity works this way, and this is something that makes it unique and also makes it hated by the other two religions. So just something to put out there. And I know there's different denominations and some of them are crazy. Like Mormonism is absolutely weird and insane. But I think the baseline assumption that we all have free will, and that is where our values of freedom and individuality come from. That's the thing that has to go, because it is ultimately really masculine. Okay. And that's why they attack men, and that's why they attack Christians and white people, because all of those things come together with a similar sub value system. But anyway, those are just my thoughts on that. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments. Maybe you disagree. It's fine. I'm just putting out my opinion on there. So let's get to the last story here. This is going to be slightly longer than normal sausage. All right. So we have another bit of enrichment that happened in England. So on November 1st, 2025, Anthony Williams, a 32-year-old British man from Peterborough, allegedly carried out a series of violent knife attacks that began in the early hours at Pontoon Dock DLR station in East London, where he stabbed a passenger in the face, causing serious injuries. Later that evening, around 7:30 p.m., Williams boarded an LNER high-speed train from Doncaster to London's King's Cross at Peterborough Station and launched an indiscriminate rampage, wielding a large kitchen knife and stabbing 11 people across multiple carriages. The attack triggered panic as passengers pulled emergency alarms, leading the train to divert and stop at Huntington Station in Cambridgeshire, where armed police arrested Williams within minutes using a taser. Among the victims was an LNER staff member who heroically intervened to protect passengers and remain in critical but stable condition. The other 10 victims, including passengers of various ages, were hospitalized with injuries ranging from stab wounds to lacerations. Though most have since
I get LNER trains all the time. By the way, it's London Northeast Railway trains.
Oh
I even change at Peterborough quite a lot. That's not me narrowing down the doxes. It's like there's trains that go all the way from London to Scotland.
Yeah.
So it affects a great deal of people, and I'm like, every time I visit my parents, I'm going to be thinking, is that going to be me? Is that going to be me next time? This is interesting.
Oh, Jesus. Police are investigating potential links between Williams and 3 prior incidents in Peterborough on October 31st and November 1st, including the stabbing of a 14-year-old boy with minor injuries and 2 reports of a man brandishing a knife at a local barbershop, where CCTV footage captured Williams pacing outside shortly before the attacks. Authorities have ruled out terrorism or organized crime motives, stating Williams acted alone and was not known to counterterrorism services. So I guess that's that. On November 3rd, he appeared at Peterborough Magistrates Court, confirming his name and age but listing no fixed abode as his address. He was remanded in custody without entering pleas and faces 11 counts of attempted murder, 1 count of actual bodily harm, and 2 counts of possession of a bladed article, with his next hearing set for December 1st at Cambridge Crown Court. The incident has prompted heightened rail security, station closures, and service disruptions, while drawing condemnation from King Charles and calls from politicians for stronger measures against rising knife crime in the UK. We got to ban the knives harder. One thing I will say is that there were, I think it was like 4 men that were involved in trying to stop this thing. And I know you guys have a lot to say on this, but all I will say is this. I don't know, the media, from what I understand, they have pivoted to let's talk about knives some more, and away from, well, we don't want to be racist. But one thing that I'm not seeing is here are the heroic men that stepped in, and of course not. But I just want to give that highlight. I will look for. I think there are pictures of the guys that helped stop this, so I'm going to look those up while you guys give your thoughts.
Yeah, we don't have any Daniel Pennies. We have very few Daniel Pennies in Britain. We've long since learned our lesson that no, you don't even try to defend yourself. You just let them stab you. Otherwise, the fucking government will kill you. And yeah, let's get back to the description of this man. British man. Yeah, that's what we're calling it. Once again, I mean, he certainly has a British-sounding name. What was it? Anthony Williams. Yeah. But a quick glance at the CCTV pictures that you're looking at right now will have a lot of people thinking, he doesn't look British. And anyone who says that will be arrested for racism. Many of my peers will merely take that direction and only point to the pattern, albeit the perfectly applicable pattern, that these brutal stabbing crimes are indeed committed very disproportionately by people who do not look British. Is that why they're committing these crimes? Because they don't look British, or because they're not British? Well, maybe. It does seem to be a factor, but to be honest, I would not handicap myself with such skin deep patterns, because I can see a deeper pattern if in theory the event that such a horrific violent crime is committed by a white British man whose family has been here for centuries, I would not struggle to attribute such crimes to the same common genetic or phenotypical factor. It's something I've taken pains to point out as often as I can. If anyone in Britain, white, black, brown, or other, has the misfortune of turning on the television or the radio or reading a newspaper or reading an online newspaper, they will be subjected to the same propaganda. This propaganda is practically unavoidable, even if you're trying to avoid it. The narrative across the entirety of the British press is that the native British people are all irredeemable racists, that even the peasants on the trains, who never did shit to anyone, nevertheless are somehow the benefactors of centuries of racist colonialism. Even if you're just a 9-year-old girl minding your own goddamn business, the fact that you can even afford to mind your own business is only afforded to you because your ancestors ransacked the world for resources, and now the carefree life you live, even as a 9-year-old girl, is the result of racist war crimes. So you're just as culpable as the kings and the parliamentarians who enacted this colonialism fucking centuries ago. It doesn't matter how innocent you appear to be, or how selflessly or non-violently you have lived your life. It doesn't even matter how staunchly you commit yourself to the anti-racism into which you are compelled. You are still British. And all British people are the benefactors of racism. So you need to be punished. You deserve to be punished. This is what the media is telling everyone in Britain, from dawn to dusk, from fucking twilight to starlight, from daytime to prime time, even on children's television. The whole thing is wall-to-wall propaganda that is compelled to push this political message, and only this political message. The British people deserve nothing. They deserve less than nothing. The British people deserve to have everything taken from them, and they are not permitted to complain about it. So it stands to reason, when British people hear this message, they mostly feel guilty. They manifest this message by hating other British people, but also by hating themselves. And that sort of balances out. They react by bitching at their fellow Brits and voting for policies that redistribute wealth and resources to everyone who is not British. Whereas when non-British people, especially visibly non-British people, hear this message about how they have been oppressed by the native British for centuries and still are being oppressed by us, even the 9-year-old girls, they get extremely resentful and angry and retributive to the point of psychosis. And that's why these psychotic crimes are committed so disproportionately by people of non-British origins. So we can claim that they're committing these crimes because they are non-British, perhaps because of their non-British culture, or maybe even because of their non-British genetics. But I would just like to remind everyone of this phenomenon we call stochastic terrorism. That's when a propagandist tells everyone that a certain people, a certain race, in this case the British people and the British race, deserves everything it gets. Like, we're not telling you that you should terrorize the British people. We're just saying, if you do, they had it coming. And if and when you do terrorize the British people and rape them and stab them, we in the British media will go ahead and gently brush it under the rug so nobody knows it's happening. And in the event that a British person so much as says boo to a black swan, we'll be sure to get you all as outraged as possible. To summarize, I'm not saying that there's nothing genetic about these patterns. I'm not saying that there's nothing extra-cultural about these patterns. I'm just pointing out the internal cultural patterns. If the British mainstream media really wanted to prevent all of these crimes, they would stop actively encouraging these crimes. But they don't. And they won't. The purpose of a system is what it does. And the purpose of the British mainstream media is to destroy the British people. It's barely even up for debate at this point. It couldn't be more obvious. So, by all means, deport. By all means, stop the boats. By all means, we need mass remigration ASAP. That stands to reason. But we have another huge problem on top of all of this. We call it the BBC. Well, we call it everything that's under Ofcom's remit. We have, well, it's the Eye of Sauron, to be perfectly fucking honest. We have a force of evil that is warping everyone's minds from a distance while safely guarded in its magical tower in Mordor. Maybe the Lord of the Rings metaphor doesn't really work, since the Sauron that torments us is not of the orcs. It's not of the Uruk-hai. It is of man himself. It is London. It is the capital of the better-than-you community. It has long since been captured by the forces of oikophobia. It's as though Gondor has already been taken by the dark forces. And it only uses the beacons to trick us into advancing against Rohan and eventually the Shire. It is so much worse than our heroic mythology even predicted. The quest on which we might send Frodo is far more fraught with danger than we have ever even been prepared to imagine. In fact, Frodo has already become another Gollum. Even Sam has become another Gollum. Maybe it's about time we just send the fucking giant eagles, right? I know you'll keep saying, but we can't send the giant eagles to carry the one ring, because the eagles would be corrupted by it, just like men or elves or wizards or dwarves would be corrupted by the one ring. We have to send hobbits to do it. But my dude, every hobbit we sent to destroy the one ring has become corrupted by it. It's not working. Maybe this romantic fantasy of yours was never going to work. Maybe we should just send in the giant eagles, not with the one ring, but with a goddamn nuke! Fuck the ring! Let's just nuke the bastards! For legal reasons, I should elaborate that I am, of course, being metaphorical. I don't literally mean we should nuke London, but I do mean we should figuratively nuke London. What would that entail, my dear listeners? I don't know. It's fucking complicated. Maybe I'll sit down for 15 years and write an epic fantasy novel that makes more sense than Tolkien could have envisaged. Fine. Wish me luck. I hope we still have a country 15 years from now. In the meantime, just stop watching TV. Stop watching The Eye of Sauron. And do your best to encourage your normie friends and your normie family to stop watching The Eye of Sauron. Best of luck. I'll be sat here with my dick in my hand and Satan's balls in my mouth. I'll see you on whatever side we're headed for. Dr. Random Account Monty News on Imagine Radio.
So we all just have to learn to stop worrying and love the bomb. That's what it is. But in all seriousness, this is a thing that's been known for millennia. Like, men have known it, women have known it, governments have known it. And the way governments respond to that knowledge and their choices in how the public of their nations are able to use that knowledge will inform you as to the nature of your government, whether it is in any way, neutral, with some parts being in any way benevolent, or whether it's all malicious, 100% malicious. It's at least partially malicious. Your government, no matter where you live, your government is at least partially malicious. But it's always been known as soon as the concept of crime, violent crime, existed, and even before that, when it was just tribalism and people being violent toward each other in interpersonal conflicts with no government telling them that it was a crime. It's always been known that the biggest deterrent to interpersonal violence is the prospect of immediate consequences that are intolerable to the perpetrator. Some countries respond to this by taking away due process rights, and as soon as you are caught engaging in any kind of crime, you face consequences on the spot, and intolerable at that. Things like having your hand cut off or your eye poked out or being thrown off of a building. But other countries have tried to preserve a right of self-defense with some success, varying degrees. In the U.S., the successes have been mitigated. The federal level successes have been mitigated by local level despots that do things like presuming you guilty of being as aggressive as your aggressor if you defend yourself against an assailant. But in the UK, they took away the tools for it. And when that resulted in more violent crime against the person of the citizens of the country, the government is responding by threatening to take away more tools for potential self-defense and punishing people for brandishing tools of self-defense in the face of people who are significantly more capable than they are of engaging in violence because of size and gender and so on. And what I mean by capable of engaging in violence is not that women are less capable of engaging, but that women are less skilled at creating an outcome with that violence than men are. And part of it is because women don't have the strength or the size. We are not equal. So when one is engaging in defense, to punish one for engaging in defense against an adult when she's a kid, that's particularly egregious. But in any case, like this is pretty much a major sign of despotism, taking away your ability to defend yourself against an aggressor. When there are potentially guns going to be present, there's less knife crime because nobody wants to bring a knife to a gunfight. And when the home a criminal might consider breaking into might have a gun in it, the people are less likely to break into homes. The more people are in control of their own self-defense, the less likely people are to aggress against them. And the more capable they are in their own self-defense, the more access they have to the tools of self-defense, the less likely an attacker is to actually do anything to them. Because again, they don't want to face immediate, intolerable repercussions, consequences. Nobody wants to be shot unless there's something really wrong with their head. Nobody wants to be stabbed. Nobody wants to have the shit kicked out of them, and nobody wants to go to jail. So that's the solution, to give people the ability and the freedom to defend their own space, their own homes, their own person, their own families, their own country, and stop restricting access to those tools. But unfortunately, there is a huge faction in politics all over the world that is using situations like this to try to convince people that the best way to prevent violent crime is for you to give up the tools of self-defense. It doesn't make sense when it's described that way. So, of course, they don't describe your tools of self-defense that way. They describe them as tools of aggression, even though you've never used them that way, and you never would. Right? That indicates that they're engaging in bad faith arguments, and you shouldn't listen to them. And when people do, it's because they're lazy. It is a lot easier to just accept the idea that taking away the individual's tools for self-defense will prevent criminals who obtain those tools illegally, regardless of what the rest of the population does when it's legislated that you can't have them, from attacking them. You can't argue that the way that it's actually true. You can't argue that the way that it actually is. The way that the real way that it is, and sound rational. That yeah, we should take people's self-defense tools away so that less crime will happen. No, it doesn't work that way. So from now on, anytime you hear crime cited as a reason, any type of crime cited as a reason why your tools of self-defense should be taken away, point out what they're arguing. Point out the stupidity of their argument. Make fun of them and bully them for it. Because that's the only way to shut these assholes up. And it's the only way to make it unpopular to make those arguments again. Like, I think that people should be inherently mean when it comes to this. You're right to stop someone from hurting you, taking your shit, harming your family, and taking over your neighborhood should not be infringed. And there is no but my this, but my that, but my school shootings. No, but my kids playing with guns. Well, don't let kids play with guns. Hold the parents responsible. That's it. It doesn't mean that other people shouldn't be able to defend themselves. If you don't want a gun, don't buy one. If you don't want a knife, don't buy one. So there you go. That's what we have to do.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks for your thoughts on that. And yeah, I mean, so I did look it up, and there were some people who worked for the rail that confronted the attacker head on, shielding passengers and attempting to disarm him. There is CCTV footage reviewed by the British Transport Police that showed he ran towards danger and blocked the knifeman from advancing through the carriages. He sustained life-threatening injuries, stabbed multiple times, and remains in critical but stable condition in hospital. Then there was that was a LNER rail worker named Samir Zatouni. And then there was an unnamed male passenger. Witnesses described a man, likely in his 30s to 40s, that was slashed in the face, who intervened to protect a young girl from the attacker, positioning himself between her and the knife. He was hospitalized, but has since been discharged. Passenger Thomas McLaughlin told BBC, "There were definitely many heroes on that day. He was trying to protect a young girl from being attacked. So I just wanted to put a little bit of a highlight on the men that stepped in and put their safety in danger to protect the innocents from this maniac, because they will, I mean, obviously the media is going to put a focus on the offender and not the defenders. So that's kind of like what I wanted to do there. All right, so that is going to be it for the show today. Slightly longer than normal sausage, so maybe a bit of a shorter after show, I'm afraid. But we are going to go to the after show now. We're going to look at this article from the Baptist News, where they're sort of like looking back at the very viral conversation between Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes. And the problem with it was none of the other stuff they talked about, just when women came up. And that Carlton and, well, especially Fuentes, basically declares that women are a problem for young men today. So we're going to look at that and maybe talk a little bit about it in the patron show. Huh?
That's pretty mild.
Yeah, well, he was pretty mild, but I do have like another video where he goes into more of what he wanted to talk about, because they only had so much time. But we'll look at it in the patron show. If you guys want to join us for that, go to feedthebadger.com/subscribe and become a member. $5 a month will get you into the Discord, where you'll be able to enjoy all of the rest of the bonus content. Please consider doing that. And thank you guys for joining me on the show. Thank you guys for tuning in and watching. I want to know what you guys think. So first of all, if you guys like this video, please smash like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today, and please, please, please share this video, because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of HBR News, and we'll talk to you all in the next one. See you next Tuesday.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.